Hey, Taylor Elwood here, and today, for the first ever Magical Experiments live video show, which is going to be happening every week at the same time, I'm going to be talking about the topic of divination and scrying. And really, this topic came about because I decided in both the Magical Experiments and pop culture Facebook groups that I would try out a themed month topic. And I asked people to post, vote on a topic, and somebody ended up adding in the pop culture magic one, scrying, and the magical experiments they added magic on the fly, which I'm going to talk about next week. Not sure I'm going to do the theme thing in the future, just because it ended up not being quite what I thought it would be. But hey, that's why we experiment with stuff, so we can discover. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about divination and scrying, and I'm going to, first of all, explain why I lump the two together, because people might be like, well, why are you lumping divination and scrying together? Aren't they separate things? But let's look at what divination and scrying are. For all intents and purposes, it's trying to find certain patterns in reality. It's trying to obtain answers. A scrying technique isn't really all that different from a divination technique. And perhaps the main difference is the medium. With scrying technique, you might be using something such as a bowl of water or a crystal ball or a mirror or something else like that. Whereas with divination, you're going to be using I Ching coins or tarot decks or sticks and bones or whatever else. So the point is that you're still trying to do the same thing. You're trying to use these tools to discover some type of meaning that allows you to understand a possible future or to understand what your present circumstances are. You're looking for meaning inside of what's happening here. Now, I've noticed I have a couple people watching, so welcome. And, if you folks have questions as I'm talking, feel free to post them because I will respond to them. Let's make this live. Let's make this interactive since I'm live right now. So one of the questions that was asked was, what tools do I use when I'm using scrying, when I'm doing scrying and or divination? And the truth of the matter is, I don't do divination / scrying all that often, but the tools that I've used, and when I have used it in the past, I've typically used a mirror for scrying purposes. I also have a couple different crystal balls that I've used. And in terms of divination, I've used tarot decks, primarily tarot decks, really. Although actually one thing I did use one time that was kind of interesting was some mahjong tiles, which was interesting for a game. So that was kind of cool. And when I've done scrying as far as like a mirror or a crystal ball or something like that, what I've found typically best, because people ask, like, how do you go about doing that? What I found best is that you basically want to look into it, but you want to let your vision blur. You don't want to be hyper-focused. You actually want to let your vision just kind of blur and see what's revealed to you as a result. You're looking for patterns. You're looking for things to kind of present themselves. If any of you've watched Game of Thrones, the latest season, you might remember at one point the one character is asked to look into the fire by the other guy. And so that's a form of scrying right there. And he's basically looking into the flames and just kind of letting the flames tell a story to him. I mean, that's basically the same thing with a crystal ball or a mirror. So you might be wondering, why don't I do divination and scrying all that often? I mean, after all, a lot of people do. They're like, you have people who will draw a card for each day, or they'll do divinations right before they do a magical working and all that stuff. So you might wonder, well, why don't you do it, Taylor? And here's the thing. I used to do all that. In fact, I even had a form of divination of sorts where I would write down like a theme for the month, and then I would then go about and write about that month. And I would find that because of that theme, that I would end up having experiences during that month that I would write about that related to the theme. I would read about it afterwards. And what I found with divination, and it's actually something I found with astrology, because I've had a few people who've done astrological readings for me as well, and I found this to be just kind of interesting, is that what you end up having is what they call in physics the observer effect. If you're not sure what the observer effect is, basically what it is this. The act of observation of an experiment changes the experiment. It changes the probabilities and of opportunities and what have you. Interesting thing. So the very act of observation changes changes the nature of the experiment. The way that I took this and how I've applied it to my own, and really what I've seen is that when I have done divination readings or anything like that, I found that it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because basically what you're doing is when you do a reading, you're laying out the cards, or whatever tools you're using. You're doing the reading to discover some answers, but at the same time, what you're doing is you're also imprinting that in your subconscious mind. And so what you're doing is you're limiting the field of probabilities. Now, this can be very useful on one hand, and on the other hand, it can also be problematic. So how can it be useful? Well, it can be useful in the sense that we can actually do purposeful magical workings around a desired outcome that we want to create, and we can purposely pick the cards and choose them and actually create an enchantment out of the tarot reading. And I've done that before, where I basically set circumstances up where I've been like, this is the outcome I want, and I'm going to set the cards up so that they're going to help create the outcome. But that's not divination, that's enchantment. When we're looking at it in terms of enchantment, what we end up finding is, or divination, what we end up finding, though, is that it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that limits us to the actual reading or to things around the reading. Now, again, your experience may be different than mine, but that's what I found, that when I've gone and done this stuff, it's ended up limiting the actual probabilities of what I've been going for with my magical, or what I've been looking for. Case in point, I got an astrological reading a while back from my really good friend Eric, and I always appreciate it. But one of the things he said was, well, you're going to be going through this Neptune cycle, and there's going to be lots of things you're going to try, and it's not going to quite work out. And of course, things didn't quite work out. But the question I had to ask myself was afterwards, did things not work out because I had this reading and it influenced my mind? And it kind of set the field of probabilities toward this thing? Or was it happening because there was a genuine astrological influence? Now, it could be there really was a genuine astrological influence and it would have happened regardless. But I don't know that for sure. What I do know is that I got the astrological reading and it limited the field of probabilities for me. And this is why I don't really do divination for myself. I'll do it for other people, but I won't really do it for myself. And the reason is because it's kind of like, do I really want to limit the field of probabilities? I found that when I haven't done stuff like divination before a magical ritual, that it's actually opened up the field of probabilities more. And the way that I know that is I've done workings where I did the divination beforehand, and I saw that, okay, I got results that were okay, but they were definitely influenced by the reading. And then I've done workings where I didn't do the divination, and the results were amazing. And why? Because I was able to entertain the possibility that I could get those results, regardless of whether or not it would have seemed probable. If I had done the divination reading, though, there might have been things that were said like, oh, hey, you're going to have factor X coming over in here, and factor X is going to cause this magical working to crash and burn, or something else along those lines. And here's another thing, interestingly enough. Today, I'm in the process of looking for some work right now. And today there was this career center or a career fair. And I got up and I'm like, do I even really want to go to this? And I pulled a card. And the card was like the 3 of Wands. So it's like, yeah, you should go. Now my intuition, on the other hand, said, no, you really shouldn't go. It's going to be a waste of time. Now I chalked the intuition up to being like, well, I just don't really want to go. I was like, no, I'm going to go. So I got dressed up, got my resumes out, went. I got there, and there were literally only seven vendors there, so to speak. And none of them were offering anything remotely related to what I wanted to do or could do. I should have listened to my intuition. That damn card didn't help me. Now, that could be just bad divination on my part, fair enough, but I've done enough readings for other people and had enough and gotten and been able to get enough verifiable claims that I don't think that's the case. So I think that, I understand some people really are like, oh, divination, scrying, and hey, don't get me wrong. I mean, good stuff. And if you want to do it, go for it. But I think it's worth actually as an experiment here. And so I'm just going to put this out there as an experiment here. It's worth asking yourself, how much would occur? How am I limiting my field of probability by relying upon these tools? What am I not considering? What am I not opening myself up to because I've been given a reading, or because I'm doing a reading for myself, and this is what it's presenting to me, and that's all I'm seeing. It's kind of like divination puts on blinders, and I would say the same with scrying. I mean, really. And the other question you might ask yourself is, why do I really need to know the outcome? In a certain sense, when I stopped relying on divination and scrying so much, I kind of said to myself, okay, I don't need to know the outcome. I already know, I know what I want, and that's what I'm going for. I don't need to know the outcome of it beforehand. I just need to go out there and do it. So that's kind of my 2 cents on divination and scrying. Again, for people who are watching this later on, you may or may not agree, and that's okay. Feel free to comment and share what your thoughts are, but that's kind of my experience, and it's really why I don't do much in the way of divination and scrying anymore for myself. I do offer tarot readings sometimes, and usually when I offer those readings, I offer them in the context of, let's look at the variables around you that are influencing things. And how I even approach that is, I always try to say, okay, well, here's some things to think about, but keep your eyes open to other probabilities and opportunities as well, because there may be things you're missing out on. And the reason I do that is because I really want to make people aware of, okay, here's what this is saying, but here's some different ways you can interpret it, and here's some other things you could be thinking about. And I think that's really important, because if you're going to do that, if you're going to do a reading for someone else, one thing that should be in the back of your mind is, how am I potentially limiting this person to the outcome that I'm sharing with them? Is that what I really want to do? Okay, so that's it for the very first Magical Experiments weekly show. Next week, we will be back with a discussion about magic on the fly. And in a little while here, I'm going to post the video here to the Magical Experiments in Pop Culture Magic group. And if you're not part of those Facebook groups, make sure you join them. You can see the links right under the description of this show here. So come join us. And thank you for watching, and take care.